It is a foolish man who kicks a hungry tiger, she warned. Give me that sandwich. I've put extra beef dripping. Thought you looked like you needed it, he said, settling himself into his favourite armchair. Sounds of continuing construction drifted in from the hallway. Morose sort of chap, isn't he? Hans said, biting the end off a fresh cigar. He has reason to be. You mean the fire? Gretel spoke as she chomped, the taste of smoked bacon reminding her how many hours it had been since she'd last eaten. Well, yes, partly that, but not entirely. Should think that would be enough. Business in ruins, dead body, family being subject to endless public gossip and speculation. Are they? Are they what? The subject of endless, etc., etc. They certainly are at the inn. He paused to light his cigar, puffing thoughtfully for a moment, then said, Old man Hunt doesn't come in any more. Couldn't take the whispering in corners. Weren't people sympathetic? I should say not. But he's lost everything. His workshop, his livelihood. Hardly his fault, is it? Isn't it? Is it? It might be. Some say. It could be. Some say. Hans gave a slow, knowing nod, topped off by a clumsy, conspiratorial wink. Gretel sighed. Hans, please, I've slept very little in the past 48 hours, and my brain aches from trying to fathom the duplicities and peculiarities of human nature. I could do without having to unpick the tangle of your thought processes too. Very well, I'll put it plainly. I do so wish you would. 2 words. He exhaled thick curls of, for once, appropriate smoke. The first is arson, the second, insurance. People think that Hun set fire to his own yard. Now, I didn't say that. But it's what you think. It's what everyone thinks. Everyone who drinks at the Brackston Inn, yes. Gretel shook her head slowly. But why would he? I mean, he was running a successful business. Was he? Wasn't he? It could be that he was. It might be that he was not. Some say... Don't start that again, for pity's sake. His yard was full of carts. It's where everyone went to get theirs fixed or buy a new one. He had both sons working for him. I've known the man years. He's well liked in the town. He's well liked in the inn too, particularly at the card table. What? Played a very good hand of bridge when occasion demanded. Passable canasta too, if I recall. But whist, that was his real passion. Pity he wasn't much good at it. Well, he was good at the cards, played the game well enough, but the gambling, hopeless. Not a clue as to how to go about it. Concept of bluffing or keeping a poker face as mysterious to the Hund as the Orient. Gave himself away? Every time. Bit unsporting, taking money from someone so plainly incapable of doing the thing properly. Since when was gambling sporting? There was money to be made and plenty willing to make it. Besides, Hund loved it, the thrill of the thing. What, even though he kept losing? Hans shrugged. Spiced up his rather dull life, I suppose. Gretel was stunned by this revelation, stunned at Hund having a secret vice, stunned at the new light this information threw on the case, stunned at her own stupidity for not having considered the option for herself. After badgering Hans for a second sandwich, trying and failing to squeeze anything further out of Roland, and doing a quick tally of expenses incurred and to come with regard to Frau Habsburg's cat case, Gretel hurried over to the beauty parlour for what she anticipated would be a lengthy session of work. As luck would have it, there was sufficient space in Madame Renoir's appointment book to accommodate Gretel's needs. She submitted herself to comprehensive and gruelling sessions of waxing. Legs, underarms, forearms, bikini line, top lip, bottom lip, chin. Where did all this hair come from, she wondered. Was there nowhere it would not sprout? With every passing year, the battle against it becoming entirely hirsute grew more time-consuming and more painful. There were, Gretel decided, areas of the human form not designed to be so brutally treated. It would have been so much easier, so much less taxing to simply let nature take its course. Let her body evolve and mature as it saw fit. But that way, she suspected, lay a furriness too horrible to contemplate. How could she expect to be taken seriously to do her job effectively with a permanent 5 o'clock shadow tinging her face? And what point was there in the existence of fabulous backless gowns if one was forced to keep one's back covered for fear of frightening the horses? And what man, in all honesty, would thrill to the feel of bristle and stubble against his... No, there was no avoiding it. Depilation was a vital part of Gretel's life, and that was that. She found thoughts of Uber-General Ferdinand von Ferdinand slipping unbidden into her mind. She recalled the scent of sandalwood and the warmth of his smile. "Ah!" she screamed as Madame Renoir completed her deft deforestation. "Et voilà, Fräulein Gretel, all is finished." Thank heavens. "Albertine will be ready to wash your hair for you in just a few moments." Albertine? I thought Joanna might do it. Joanna? "As you wish, Fräulein." Madame Renoir clapped her hands and issued instructions in 2 languages so that there would be no doubt as to what she wanted. Joanna accompanied Gretel over to the seat by the window. "Please, Fräulein, lean back. There. Is that warm enough for you?" she asked as she tipped water from a large pitcher over Gretel's hair and into the basin. "Just right, thank you." Gretel waited, hoping for the customary banal conversation that ordinarily passed between hairdresser and client, but none was forthcoming. The girl applied shampoo and began to work up a lather. "I'm afraid it's a bit of a state," Gretel told her. "We have some excellent treatments, Fräulein. Your hair is exhibiting signs of stress." "I should say it is. Not surprising, given what I've put it through lately." She paused, granting Johanna the opportunity to ask questions, and so start up a sort of conversation that might actually lead somewhere. Anywhere. Nothing. Not a word. It seemed that the girl was every bit as moribund as her ex-boyfriend, and every bit as hopeless in furnishing Gretel with the information she needed. She took a deep breath, inhaling a few bubbles, and tried once more. "I admit it's not only my poor hair that has suffered through recent events. I am myself exhausted from such a set of bizarre events as you could not imagine." Clearly Joanna not only could not, but would not imagine. Gretel ploughed on. "Not the least of it was the destruction of my front door. Reduced to kindling, I tell you. Thank heavens a skilled workman was at hand to build me another. I knew whom to send for straight away. Hans, I said, waste not one moment, but go directly to Herr Hunt and see if his fine young son Roland might come and mend our door." At the mention of the name, the girl rubbed Gretel's hair harder, her fingers kneading and squeezing ruthlessly. Gretel winced, but continued. "Such a helpful young man, and so devoted to his family." A harumphing noise was all Joanna allowed herself to emit. "A sensitive soul, I believe. I detected a sadness about him." The girl's fingers paused in their work. "Yes, a deep sorrow. Not that he said anything, of course, but I could tell. It was there." "Could you?" Joanna asked very quietly. "Oh, yes." Gretel paused to let this sink in and then struck her killer blow. "It was almost as if his heart were broken." Joanna stifled a sob. Gretel glanced over at Madame Renoir. She didn't want to overdo it. If the girl started weeping again, her employer would send her to the back room out of sight of her clients. Fortunately, the proprietor was fully occupied with a skinny woman who was having her eyebrows tattooed. "I am sorry, my dear," she said. "I seem to have upset you." "Forgive me, Fräulein," the girl sniffed. "I may be assuming too much here, but is there perhaps an affection between you and young Hund?" Johanna nodded, her fingers feebly continuing their work on Gretel's hair. "Oh, Fräulein," she whispered, "if you only knew what torments we have suffered." "Poor child, tell me." "Roland is the sweetest, dearest man in all the world." "Indeed." "Ours was a true love." "Of course. But then... Joanna shook her head, wiping tears from her face with the back of her hand. Gretel recalled something Roland had said. She cleared her throat. "The world is as it is," she said, "and we are dealt with as fate decrees." Joanna stopped sniffing and stared at Gretel in the mirror opposite. "Oh, you have spoken with him on the matter. Roland has taken you into his confidence." "I encouraged the young man to unburden himself." "Oh, Fräulein Gretel, you are a good woman. One tries." "He has suffered so, for me and for his father." The girl's expression changed, and Gretel was reminded of the sudden shift in mood and display of temper she had witnessed when talking to Roland. "That man," she all but spat. "Herr Hund? A good fellow, by all accounts." Good? Ha! It is good. Is it good to break your own son's heart? Is it good to bring about the ruin of your own family? As soon as the words were out, her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, please, Fraulein, take no notice. I have said too much. The silly chattering of a young girl with a tender heart no more. Forgive me. Nothing to forgive, Gretel assured her. She allowed Johanna to continue her work in silence. Certainly her reaction to the mention of Herr Hund seemed to confirm Hans's theory that the older man's gambling had got him into difficulties. Beyond that, it was hard to draw firm conclusions. Something else struck Gretel in that instant, distracting her from her investigation and that line of thought. Looking at the girl's reflection in the mirror, she suddenly remembered why her face was familiar. Of course, that's Johanna. Why had it taken her so long to place what had been such a well-known face? She could clearly see the family resemblance now. Yes, it was coming back to her. When Jack, of Beanstalk fame, had been touring Bavaria a few years earlier, giving personal appearances and talks on his adventures, his little sister had accompanied him. Gretel recalled thinking how pretty she was then, too. Pretty and pretty fed up, it had seemed to her, at being so overshadowed by her brother and his swift rise to fame. Johanna was never even mentioned in the stories of his planting the magic beans, ascending to the castle in the clouds, outwitting the giant, making off with the golden goose. But what had happened after all the fuss died down? Gretel searched her aching brain. She remembered now that Jack had moved away, lured abroad by a warmer clime. She was fairly certain he'd taken his mother with him, but what of his sister? If she had ever thought about it at all, Gretel had assumed the family had emigrated together, but that could not have been the case. If Johanna had indeed been Roland's lover for some time, then she must have remained living nearby. But Gretel had not seen her once in the intervening years. With a sigh, she realised there were still too many pieces of the puzzle missing for her to assemble a clear picture of anything. Returning home, scrubbed, polished and perfumed, Gretel was greeted by the cheering sight of a splendid new front door. She went inside, calling for Hans, but he had not yet returned from the inn. The evening was sultry, a weighty sky threatening under what seemed like threatening thunder that seemed not to want to start. She fixed herself a generous brandy with plenty of ice and took it outside onto the small patio at the back of the house. Darkness was falling, but it didn't matter. The garden was not tended but left to run wild, so that it was at its best poorly lit. Shrubs had grown into shapeless leafy masses that afforded privacy and shade, which as far as Gretel was concerned was all that she required them to do. Here and there a tangle of roses provided patches of colour. Clusters of spring bulbs had successfully reproduced and multiplied unchecked into pleasing pools of lemon yellow or flame red. There was no lawn as such, but a swathe of weeds and grasses that were home to several moles and a family of adders. Gretel left the French windows wide, dusted off an ancient deck chair and lowered herself into it. She had not taken more than one sip of her drink when a loud hammering started up upon her front door. What now? She waited, hoping whoever it was would give up and leave her in peace. She had had a difficult and draining few days. These were most definitely not business hours. She wasn't expecting any callers, and surely nothing could be so urgent that it could not wait until morning. The hammering began again. "Go away," she shouted through the house. "We're closed." Still more hammering. She waited. The silence grew longer. Had she persuaded them to leave? She listened, ears cocked for sounds of further assaults on her new door, but none came. Instead, she heard footsteps hurrying round the side of the house and tracing the boundary. "Damn," she berated herself in a stage whisper. "Whoever it is knows I'm out here." She held her breath, steadying her glass lest the chinking of ice cubes pinpoint her position. From the other side of the jungle-thick hedge came the sounds of gasping. Gasping and a struggle. Muffled cries followed. All at once there was a commotion and a crashing sound, as a figure came barrelling through the hedge, forcing its way between the hazels and beeches, charging through the brambles and nettles until it fell heavily at Gretel's feet. She sprang up as quickly as her size and the protesting deck chair would allow. The man, for man it was, groaned loudly as he rolled among the flora, before clutching at first his stomach and then his throat, letting out a piteous whine and expiring. "Well, really," said Gretel. She peered down, brandy still in hand, and gently nudged the body with a foot. She had seen enough corpses to know one when it appeared in her garden. She drained her drink, put down the glass and reluctantly knelt beside the inert intruder. She checked for a pulse and was not surprised to find none. With grunt-making effort, she pushed at the dead man until he rolled over onto his back, his face revealed in the low light. Now it was Gretel's turn to gasp. Although the light was dim and the features still contorted with the agonies of death, there was no mistaking the face that stared lifelessly up at her. She found her own voice hoarse with shock, but still able to cry out in astonishment, "Good grief! Herr Peterson!" That's the end of chapter 7.